Welcome back to Communion of Saints. We go to the country of Italy, primarily in Perugia, to this very, very contemporary saint who's with us today that many people pray for intercession. Her name is Saint Rita of Cascia. She is really the flip side of Saint Jude, who we pray for impossible causes. People pray to Saint Rita in the exact same way. Let's talk about what might have been going on in her life, in her young life.
Well, it's worth noting she was born in the late 1300s. She was a married woman. Her husband was murdered. And so it's very interesting when you think of what a woman's life would be like, even in Italy, in the late or early 1400s by this time, without a husband, to be a widow. You're kind of left to the winds. And so what happens with many widows of that time, or who are deep in their faith, is they seek a life in the church. And her life then invites this fulfillment, to truly be a servant of the Lord.
What's interesting is you had mentioned that she was a widow, but she also had children who also died.
Yes.
So she's left kind of like all alone. So there's this whole sense that her life has become one of desolation. Mm-hmm. And so she enters a religious life, which was probably not unknown back then. However, there were some religious communities that did not accept her primarily because she was a widow and was married previously. But a community did accept her. She has done some wonderful things within her community, but her claim to fame really is her piety, her devotion. Legend says, it's really not legend, but those who knew her saw marks on her forehead, almost like the stigmata in the hands of Padre Pio with the crown of thorns. And so her devotion to Christ and his suffering on the cross. And isn't that really the call not only of the saints, but of all who follow Christ, that whole call to follow him, to pick up their cross daily, to walk in his way?
Absolutely. And I think as we go back then to being widowed, to experience the death of her children, and we make that connection to impossible causes, think how impossible her life must have seemed. And yet she perseveres in faith. How many of us today would lose our faith over far more trivial occurrences in our life because we might think God has abandoned us, or God doesn't care about me, or God, cares about this group and he's turned his back on me. But Rita did not do that. She not only didn't do that, she again turned to the church to offer herself. And so that crown of thorns, I think, is so symbolic of the life that was put upon her. That journey of Calvary that she had already experienced. To lose a husband and lose your children, what greater pain can there be? And so she bore very much this journey of Calvary already. And yet, like Christ, she bore it with a dignity and a reverence and an abiding faith in God.
The interesting thing, as an aside to all this, is that Saint Rita of Cascia is really the unofficial patron saint of baseball. It goes back to the 2002 movie The Rookie, starring Dennis Quaid, where and it's based on a true story actually too. The group of religious women known as the Sisters of Santa Rita had actually purchased an oil well. Well, the oil well unfortunately went sour. And so they prayed to Saint Rita for intercession to somehow bring back this oil well, because they relied on it for their community and their livestock, their life itself. And so they took rose petals and threw them over the oil well, praying to Saint Rita. And this was shown in the movie. And the people who worked the oil fields at the time tried to help the sisters along with this. And it took some time for them to actually get the well going again, which eventually proved to be very strong and life-giving in oil. But in the meantime, to kind of waylay their time, they played baseball. And so playing baseball during this time of praying to St. Rita that the oil well would come back, some of these men actually became National League baseball players. And so they became rookies, actually. And so there's that whole sense that she is their patron saint, probably not even just unofficially, but because of this. And so this whole sense of intercession among the saints, and how important is that for us nowadays as Catholics to pray to the saints to intercede for us?
Well, I think it's perhaps needed now more than ever. To invite these lives and these examples. And one thing that is noted is, we spoke earlier in a segment about John Paul canonizing and beatifying so many people and saying it was because of the need for their example. It is worth noting that we do not canonize saints for themselves. The Church's labeling them a saint or blessed doesn't make them any holier, any more devout, or any more special because of that than they were during their life here on earth. Their relationship with God allowed them to have the life they had and brings them to their place in heaven. It's for us. They are canonized so that we have examples, we have stories, we can unite with the different aspects of their lives. So much so that you can have an Italian saint who inspires and sustains the life of not only a religious community, but also the men who are assisting that community. And in the meantime, to progress in their baseball careers. But we're exposed to their lives.
It's interesting, she was canonized some 200 years after her death in 1626, but beatified, but she wasn't canonized until 1900 by Pope Leo XIII. So there's this tremendous span of time that's there. But as I had mentioned in the beginning, there's this renewed energy to pray to her because she is, like St. Jude, the patron of lost causes and impossible causes. And how many times in our life we look at our lot and we say how impossible life is and how terrible it is. And we have a saint, not only in St. Jude, but also in St. Rita, that we could pray to intercede for us, to help us work through this defunct oil well that is our lives, to make it gush again with new life in the Lord. And we do that primarily through the Lord, through Jesus, but also through the saints. And so we pray to her for all of the needs that we have this day. And we thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
The Communion of Saints was a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program hosts were Father Jim Korda and Father Jack Lavelle.